じゃあ、どうぞお願いします。
聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
はい、じゃあ行きます。皆さん、久しぶりですね。
お久しぶりです。頑張りましょう。
じゃあ、はい、お願いします。よし。My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Two sad facts we need to understand in this debate. Firstly, there is still discrimination inside corporations, despite the fact that many individual women choose to climb up the social ladder. For example, lower wages, less opportunity for paternity leave in terms of male, and also they are sexually harassed and power harassed inside these corporations. And second fact we need to understand here is, yes, we do want the society in which women can choose housewives as well. But the thing is, in the current situation, many individuals who choose to do housewives and be locked up in the house, not voluntarily always choosing it. They're oftentimes forced by the social norm, or at least notched by the social norm inside these kind of traditional gender roles. But in order to do it, we have to give them power of independence and give them power of financial capability to take care of their own lives themselves. And for that, we propose on-site proposition. I'm going to talk about basically three things. Firstly, why we can improve the situation within the working environment for women. Secondly, why other alternatives that they need to defend is simply not likely to work. And lastly, about the social changes that we aim for on our side of the house. Stance, okay? We're saying that it is okay and good, rather, to try to climb up the social ladder. But note that this does not mean that we're going to bash housewives. This is an entirely different story. And if we see Femi bashing that kind of lifestyles, probably we are bashing those people who are criticizing those housewives as well. And note that the opposition's burden are twofold. Firstly, they have to prove to you why, other than this glorification and celebration of corporate feminism, they can achieve better position of women inside the corporate structure. And secondly, either they need to claim that corporate feminism and women trying to climb up the social ladder is less of priority. Those two burdens are probably imposed upon them, rationally speaking, okay? So firstly, let's talk about the inside situation of those corporations. Three reasons why we're going to have better of it. Firstly, the recognition from bosses and male partners, male colleagues will be different, because bosses now recognize that women are not their objects and women are not always their subordinates, meaning the fact that they are less likely to order otakumi stuff to those female workers. And also note that this leads to women being able to concentrate on actual work and get some results in terms of getting actual number of, for example, new contracts and customers. All of those things will be equal ground between male and female workers inside their situation. But secondly, women are more likely to voice out because they are more willing, because they know that feminism entirely is backing them up, and there will be probably iconic figures in each corporation that are probably leading that kind of movement, which means that firstly, other women are encouraged to also voice out, at least bring that issue up and report it in, for example, the Jinjibu staff if they get sexually harassed, for example, and also male colleagues who are questioning that kind of traditional gender roles. And there are, in this gradually progressive society, many young men are also thinking about, why should it be like this? So why do women have to do all the ochakumi stuff? All of those individuals are also likely to voice out and tell this is wrong as well. Three, there will be more individuals in the powerful positions occupied by women. Firstly, which means that in the meeting, for example, executive meeting, for example, they're more likely to bring up issues of sexual harassment and power harassment, and all of those individuals will be likely to do better in making the situation of women working environment far better. But secondly, they will demand for better treatment of individuals in terms of getting more maternity leave, for example, in terms of getting more paternity leave for men, for example. All of those things will be claimed by those individuals who can climb up the social ladder. Note that right now in the situation of status quo, there's massive peer pressure from outside of those movements inside the corporate structure, and also pressure from male executives to silence those individuals who are willing to voice out, and they are basically regarded as noisy minorities. This is not exactly what we want. So what happens as a result of this kind of analysis, right? So firstly, they are more likely to fight for better wages and negotiate and unite together against lower condition of working environment and lower wages and less opportunities of promotion, for example. All of those things will happen, and this leads to, for example, again, iconic figures in each corporation being backed up by the entire strata of female workers within that corporations, which means that they are more likely to be able to fight back against that kind of injustices. Why this is important are twofold. Firstly, it's obviously people who are in the corporation do exist at the moment. Those individuals have already chosen to try to climb up the social ladder, and backing them up and backing their self-actualization is probably very much important if they ever want to claim about this choice and the that kind of like self-actualization stuff. And secondly, why this is important, well, we can save the most vulnerable individuals, because people who are the victims of sexual harassment and people who can't even think about going to another corporations because they've got no skills because of the lack of education for women specifically, are the ones who are silenced right now at the moment. And we on Side Proposition are more than happy to take the opportunity of voicing out. That is only achievable when there are iconic figures, there are the large movements inside the atmosphere, inside the corporate structure, in order to save those vulnerable individuals. POI, dozo.
Right, so being confrontational to your superiors is incredibly scary and not meant for everyone. When there are already people, individuals who are likely to be assertive on either side of the house, why should this be normalized as a standard for the variety of women who exist to take?
Again, that leads to my second argument about why the society in and of itself is unequal already, and this is the mend for that. Other alternatives won't work, which leads to my second argument. Firstly, you have to recognize that as long as we don't celebrate those individuals who are fighting back against those issues, those people who are trying to climb up the social ladder will be bashed in the form of like onna steteru people, right? All of those like negative connotation will be attached, which means that they are discouraged from even trying to climb up the social ladder higher and back up the female issues. But secondly, without this, the norm and trend of traditional gender roles is so strong. If they are in the dilemma of career and childcare, they're more likely to childcare unless we can back up by the entire movement to show, for example, lots of social networking systems, and also the retweet of these articles about corporate feminism and stuff. Thirdly, briefly, why the society as a whole can change. Firstly, the perception from the society as a whole will change, which means that the women can be competent as men are. And that perception already gives you the chance that women climb up the social ladder better. But secondly, will increase the maximum productivity of the entire society if female empowerment is, well, going further, probably economically, it also makes them recognize that women can and should work as a equal counterpart as men. So thirdly, well, basically, women are physically getting more money, which means that they're more independent. Then that's the moment when they get choices, they can then choose to be a housewife or whatever. But that kind of self-choices is only achievable when they get financial capacity, not to be trapped in an abusive relationship that locks individuals up in the household, right? All of those things are possible, and we can protect better choices of women on our side of the house. This must be advocated.
Okay, thanks for your remark. Next, I'd like to invite Eruo to open your case within 7 minutes. Here, dozo.
Ah, すいません、聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
ありがとうございます。Okay, so my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. OG didn't properly rebut to the point. Why need to normalize negative attitude toward prioritizing career? Yes, we don't deny that there are such narrative, but there are also negative narrative toward those prioritizing private or taking feminine role within the society. The ideal stance of feminism, we think, is to respect all the life choice of the women, not supporting specific life plan. And one more rebuttal about the housewives, or about the gender status quo analysis about the bosses respecting against the gender role, and women can voice out like that. But when it comes to ID in the IT or engineering or the military or some blue collar industry, it is still difficult. And also today's government has a duty to explain why celebrating corporate feminism can lead to the improvement of such and changing such social norm, because we all are sharing the sense of problem against such systematic unfairness and injustice. And also, they said already women have already chosen to make effort when they are getting into the corporation like that, but it is not necessarily the case. They are not respecting certain individuals' life plan. There are those women or like including men who are thinking of retiring after giving birth to the children. And for such people, the incentive is not to climb the ladder, but like stay in the company and gain some certain amount of money and not retire the company before they were going to retire. I mean, if the competition within the company is so harsh and like there are less like corporate support and welfare within the company, it is more difficult for such women and men to take the choice of retiring, like deprioritizing the career. Okay, so we have two arguments. First is about how the climbing up the social ladder itself shouldn't be the goal of the career and of the women, and also for the more inclusive society, including the target of men. And also second, it's about how this ban can lead to the situation where the white elite or like those who are well educated, who are already having won the bus lottery, can gain certain amounts of like money, but still they are still marginalizing women in the intersectionality, and whether the thing can be worse because there would be that leaving such intersectionalities women behind, there would be gap within the women's economic stance, and celebrating corporate feminism can leave such women without no support from the feminism. So it is very desperate situation. Before going to the first argument about climbing the ladder, first, climbing ladder itself isn't happy, we think, because what you need is basically like gaining money as much as you want. There are so many people who are prioritizing the comfortable like working environment, and also whether like having the place or like time for you to prioritize your time, and you can still stay in the company as long as you are working certain amount and not necessarily prioritizing the competition. Even if we concede that it is consequently happy if you can climb up the like corporate ladder, the process isn't happy, because in the corporate feminism you need to continually show your competitiveness within the society without like showing that there will be another woman coming out, younger women coming out, and there will be continual pressure from such things. And also when it comes to, yes, you become 70, 80 and you like reflect your life, and there are those people who have like enjoyed education, who haven't given children, but who have enjoyed the hobby, which takes time and money. But if you have like prioritize the competition, it is just have only seek for relative happiness, which is only based on the competition with others. Even if we concede, including the process, it can be happy for certain amount of people, still it is leaving certain people with environmental restriction behind. For example, you may have bigger menstrual pain, or like, and there's difficulty if the other women are like not seeking the support for menstrual pain and just seeking the more competition, or maybe your parent, or there's a peer pressure from the friends, or like your husband is seeking more children, and if you like seek competition or climbing up the social corporate ladder, it takes time and effort and many communication to like actually seek the competition. It is very environmental restriction, and in such cases, in the start line, there is like disadvantage for such individual. Whether there will be inclusivity for much more inclusivity for not only such people. Yes. Please. Point.
So, without this narrative of advocacy for women in corporations, how do you better the situation for women with heavy menstruations? Okay,
so what we are seeking is that there will be more inclusive society within the society, and there will be if people have certain amounts of like conditional things, they can just more easily voice out and like seek more private happiness, including the more care for the pain, and also more like yasumi, or like more relaxation time for such people, which is much more inclusive. Even if we concede there would be more happier people, it is okay like that. Same goal can be achieved within our side, because you can see the mean to change the attitude within the society to become more feminine. And also there will be more promote for that like consideration for others, not like limited to women. And also we can see the more effort for others, which doesn't necessarily include the implication for climbing up the corporate ladder, like voluntary ones. Such things would be promoted. And also about intersectionality, yes, the climbing the corporate ladder is much easier for certain white, like or like beautiful or like such well-educated people. But when it comes to women within the intersectionality who are still stigmatized very much in the society, it is very difficult. And there's no necessity for such who have already climbed up the corporate ladder to respect such people, such marginalized women. Whether feminism should seek the more inclusive support for women. So proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for remark. Next, I'd like to invite DPM to extend your case within 7 minutes. シェヒャーどうぞお願いします。
Can I be heard?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
ここにあったら言います。はい。言いますとか教えます。
Three points of clarification before I go on the actual substantive, which is firstly, the comparative that they need to depend on their side of the house, but secondly, about the characterization of the corporate feminism and why is that good. So firstly, about the clarification. The first thing note here is that the our side of the house of the, burden of proof that our side of the house have on our side of the house. We don't necessarily think that it is our burden to prove why all women should subscribe to this corporate feminism. There can be, we concede to some extent that there are women cannot subscribe to this ideology. What are we saying from our side of the house is that the currently existing trend of this corporate feminism, whether or not that existence is something good, I think the Prime Minister have already told you thousands of reasons as to why this is good. The second point of clarification is about the necessity of celebration. The point of information from the closing opposition was that, hey, like there is trend, so like we don't necessarily have to celebrate this. No, just status quo, it just sucks in many ways. There is subconscious bias that both men and women can have. But secondly, there is largely dominated by the male dominant society, meaning that it is doubtful to claim that without celebration women can go climb up social ladder in the first place. Let's talk a little bit more about self-limitation. I think women are largely women largely have self-limitation in every context. This might happen for the reason that historical reason or the normative reason that women does not think she or they can climb up the social ladder in the status quo. This is a precise reason why we need to celebrate this norm, for the reason that without celebration, massive amounts of women don't know their possibility to compete in a corporate ladder. I think celebration is necessarily important. The third point of clarification is about the weak labor which characterized from the leader of opposition. I don't necessarily think that this issue is something exclusive to our side of the house. There is literally zero mechanism from their side of the house as to why it's gonna be okay situation on their side of the house by keeping the status quo. So firstly, about the the comparative that they need to depend on their side of the house. We share the goal from each side of the house that women climbing up the social ladder is something good. Therefore, the question becomes is that which side of the house can provide better efficacy in terms of women being a higher position within the corporation. Opposition said, hey, like in the opposition's counterfactual that they need to depend on their side of the house is that individual choice is important and it's some self-actualization that women needs to have. 3 points of responses. Firstly, we doubt the value of self-actualization on the opposition paradigm for 2 reasons. A, because housewife in the opposition paradigm is something mentally looked down by the male. I don't necessarily think that these individuals have dignity to be housewife on their side of the house. But second point of reasoning is that like numbers of option or the range of option that women have is something limited on their side of the house for the reason that women cannot choose to be in the corporation, and the only option that they have is to stay in the home. I don't necessarily think that just because the women are happy in that situation does not necessarily mean that is the intrinsic value that these individuals have. The paradigm that we need to support, like on either side of the house, is that women have both of choices, going for corporation and staying home, and choose that staying home option. If that is the case, that's something okay, but I don't necessarily think that given the fact that women don't have like that option to begin with, mean that I don't necessarily think that this argument is something viable. But second response to this material about the self-actualization is about the long-term benefits. We can achieve the women who wants to stay in the home in the long run. Why is this true? Because on our side of house in the long run, as it stands, we do not bash, we're not bashing the housewife, meaning I don't necessarily think that there is some like perverse incentive not to stay in the home. But second thing note here is that in the long run, women can compete in company. This does not logically necessarily means that the women needs to go in the corporation. There should still be some room for women to be staying in the home. But third response to this material is that in the status quo, I think in the status quo, women who want to climb up the social ladder in the corporation cannot, right? I think this significantly deprives the choice of these individuals, deprives the self-actualization from these individuals. They need to explain why is this okay if they claim that self-actualization is something important. Part of information.
Yeah, so why do you have to be overly assertive in the workplace to be in the workplace? Even if you don't get the fullest pay, you're able to get some degree of pay and the degree of comfort that women are able to then get some degree of mental support from.
No. Some degree of payment is not enough because the men can earn more payment. I think that unequal situation is something not negatable in the first place. Second, substantive about the characterization of the corporate feminism. Opposition side of the house, might say, hey, masculinity is not something good. We concede that the masculinity is not something totally okay. There can be some toxic masculinity on either side of the house. But government side of the house burden of proof is not to say masculinity is something good right now, but rather saying that right now in the current situation, the only option that we have is this masculinity or subscription to the masculinity. This is a sort of burden of proof that we have on our side of the house. The first question that I want to ask here is that why the way other than the masculinity is not going to be successful. The first reason is that the society is just dominated by the masculine men in the first place. The men, especially who have power, authority, can control the society. I don't necessarily think that just saying something to that individual is something effective way to change the society. But second reason to say here is that masculinity is something representative of the power, authority in and of itself. That means that taking other way means that they lose that power and authority. I don't necessarily think it is something effective. Opposition side of the house proves that need to prove why the corporate alternative other than the corporate feminism is something effective in dealing with this issue. I don't necessarily think that material from their side of the house prove this material. I don't think they can win this way. But second question that I want to ask here is that why the masculinity is something good. The premise we need to recognize here is that women can be masculine in the first place. It's apparent to deny this premise in the first place. Hence, what would be likely to happen on our side of the house is that the competitiveness or the masculinity can be the feature that women can also subscribe to in the first place. We think that the masculinity or the competitiveness of something clear and important criteria for in deciding what person to go what person to get promoted. I think having this is not really bad material in the first place. Last issue is about the elaboration as to why the corporate feminism is something effective. The first thing note here is that the corporations incentive is to make women in a higher position only happen if the corporate feminism does exist, for the reason that on their side of the house, less women want to climb up the social ladder. On that situation, I don't necessarily think that the corporation have massive capacity to help a woman in the first place. As the conclusion, corporate feminism is the only way to make the women better. In terms of the vulnerable women that they've characterized on their side of the house, I think the entire aggregate level of the empowerment of the women is something beneficial to the most vulnerable kinds of individual. Proudly propose this motion.
Okay, thanks for your remark. Next, I'd like to invite the LO to extend your case within 7 minutes. Yeah, that's all.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Today's opening government side assumes that females who succeeded in competition and climbed to the ladder successfully would have a good implication to the society, especially for females who are suffering from gender inequality in the status quo. However, it is actually not true. Those females who succeeded is having actually do not have a good implication, and also as opening a person side clearly contribute to this debate by providing unique actors who get suffering from the cooperative feminism, which is females and also Black people or such intersectional people, and moreover there is a less likelihood that those successful female can behave socially good for behave good or protect those intersectional people. So that's why we are very proud to stand here for person. As a second speaker of opening opposition, I'd like to add the important matter to the Prime Minister, that is the principle level why the cooperative feminism is actually against the purpose of feminism movement, and also what will happen for each actors, especially for the intersectional people. Firstly, the purpose of feminism movement. That is the purpose is that cooperating each other to fight for an equal position to merit in the first place. They share goals, share problems, and also they share likely to share the method. However, what comparative feminism looks like is that females are required to fight each other to compete or to get higher status, which is really, really problematic to achieve the entire shared goal of feminist movement. And also the core problem of gender is a male dominant society, the situation where females need to live in the world which male created is a most unique value which is supposed to be against it by the feminist movement, but because females' voice is mitigated and which is needed to make change. For example, competition in company, female are required to adapt. What happens? It can be a pressurized female who want to work and also have who want a baby or who want to prioritize their private life, but at the same time they also want to have a career, better career. Those females seen as a burden for society if the cooperative feminism became dominant, because no more change, and also there will be no more changes for those females. Impact is even if some females succeeded to have a tougher laws and authority, they are not likely to protect those vulnerable people or those females who want a baby but also continue their work, since they are followed to a mutual concept if you want to succeed, you should work more and more, and you should compete more and more. So that's why, for those females, they would like to create narrative it's their fault, because if you cannot success, because I can do, or being female cannot be used as an excuse or something like that. Why this lead huge impact or huge damage on the female? Because in the first place, the female is the actor who have no one to understand in the first place, and only females or feminist in this institution understand the situation and also the problem that those female have gap between house and jobs or something like that. And also because they share goal or problem, the strong incentive to focus on those females. But inside, what happens? Those cooperative feminism would be supports and society pay attention to those iconic figures female compete in the male dominant also succeeded. There would be no attention female who cannot succeed or female who are structurally need to lose the jobs or something like that. That is a really problematic, and also the unique actor which cannot be saved in the government side, and also there are unique victims who can be behind it from cooperative feminism, which is female who as reader of version already provided they are females who cannot be succeeded in competition in the career. Why? Because they are simply poor to have education or no connection with those chances, or they're simply not good at being productive or something like that. But most important actor or most important reason why those females who cannot be succeeded is a most vulnerable actor, that people who are females, people who are minority in gender scope, at the same time people who are Black, other ethnic people minority in race scope. For example, also the research shows what female actually get $70 per hour, but black females have $13 per hour. This clearly shows that this minority is even like their females, this minority will have a much more suffering and also difficult situation to succeed in the cooperative feminism. We clearly know from the difference of the payment each race female get, white females have a more power or resources to take advantage of and also succeed in career or like climb up the ladders. For example, like white can go university, but black cannot go. If the religious minority relate, like Islamic females are far more difficult to go education or get education or succeed in job, even job. But what impression the society get in government side is females actually can do. Female who cannot just lazy or something like that. But they are like structural difficult situation for females. Those situations are actually ignored in your side. And the society like it would have get less and less interest towards those like intersectionality, and those females are becoming more minor and lose the female cooperative females to support each other. And also even female from minority can succeed it and go up the ladder. Those females do not have the good implications. Why? Because they have the idea that because I am female and also I am minority.
マナトリポイント取ってください。すいません。
はい。
どっちでも。
Okay, ちょっと待ってください。じゃあ、opening government.
So, how on your side do you successfully help those vulnerable, diverse women in a corporation, like people who want to have a baby, without people in the deciding positions occupied by a majority of women?
Because like in your side, like those like the incorporated feminism, the like succeeding in the competition or like acting like a males have a like goals of the feminist movement or a way of being successful in your side. So that's why there would be have a less motivation to tackle with those like related issues of gender or minority. But in our side, females share goals and values which is like against the male dominant society and also change the criteria which is created by males. So that's why there will be no like differences of gender or races or religious people. Even those black people or white people or religious minority have the shared goal and also incentive to fight for male dominant society and also a male dominant society. So that's why in our side much more like prioritize those variation of the problem in the first place. So that's why. So that's why we are very proud to here opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for remark. Next, I'd like to invite MG to open an extension within 7 minutes. Yeah, that's all.
はい、聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
ありがとうございます。Okay, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Two failures coming from the opening hat. Firstly, we don't understand uniqueness for coming from the opening government, right? They're just saying that like given the situation that we have variety of social movement, we don't understand, opening government was completely unable to explain why this specific sort of like movement and celebration is important, right? But that's my first extension coming from closing government is going to be why this specific sort of movement is result to be so that it's going to be deserved to be celebrated. This is also going to be involving contents, like for example, telling you why discrimination or those kind of microaggressions are rather going to decrease on our side of the house and going to be also fulfilling the premise coming from the opening government, why those kind of role model arguments is going to be rather likely on our side of the house. The second extension coming from closing government is going to be why those kind of like climbing up social ladder is simply going to be rather going to be more accessible to vast majority of people that is going to directly engaging with the opening opposition in this case, and also going to be preempting case coming from closing opposition properly. So all stations are going to be integrated in my speech. So moving on to first extensions, about uniqueness. So with two analysis of a celebration coming from closing government. Firstly, we think those celebration is not necessarily at the expense of other social movement, right? We think that coexistence with those celebration and, for example, social movement and passion for work-life balance that is going to directly engage in the opening option best case, or for we think like the self-actualization movement of self-actualization or those kind of things is simply possible on outside the house, right? But notice we think this is rather going to better done on outside the house for the reason that simply that the reason why those kind of social movement is failing on the outside of the house is simply because we have patriarchy society, right? Since this motion and celebration is the most direct way and the most efficient way to tackle those kind of patriarchal system that is predominant in those kind of places, those male-dominant society and the male-dominant companies, those kind of places, we are more than happy to say this celebration is rather better off. But secondly, we think those celebration is independent from glorification of male-dominant society, right? We think that like in that kind of situation, rather like those celebration is going to illustrate the situation where certain people are going to be diving into those kind of male-dominant society in order to break that patriarchy corrupted system that is going to be, for example, that is going to be broadcasted by media or those kind of things that is going to be internalized for those kind of people. And we think, for example, like other social movements such as fourth wave feminism is also going to be boosting that kind of situation, meaning those kinds like this celebration is rather going to severely criticize those kind of patriarchal system, and we think that those kind of values going to be internalized to much more number of people when compared to side opposition. But secondly, even if you can see some people persisting in glorification of male dominant society or conservatism, but we think that is going to be also decreasing and get smaller and smaller on outside the house. So this is a unique delta in this debate. So having said that, moving on to second extensions, why rather individuals are going to be better off on outside the house. Notice we think to begin with, the burden on the government side is not to prove that any individuals are guaranteed access to better situations, right? Since we have this motion asking value judgment why this celebration is like this celebration is rather deserve to do. We think that is going to be the case coming the claim coming from the opening opposition, the competition is still going to remain is not something that is directly engaging with coming from with the best case coming from government side, right? But just in case, I'm going to tell you why this is rather likely to be achieved. Firstly, we think like those kind of like competitions rather are severe, even more severe when we have like male dominant society that is still remaining on those situations. Firstly, because those kind and we think no, never mind. We think this yeah. So 4 reasons why individuals are going to be better accessing those kind of decision-making process or even better situation for Firstly, we think that those kind of celebration is going to simply going to increase the representation of those people, right? We think that's just an increasing number of people who are advocating is just going to empower those kind of individuals. But secondly, we think that is also going to incite, for example, able person are going to joining those kind of situations, opting into that kind of movement, and going to be, for example, making a fruit or those kind of places. Those kind of things, right? We think this is going to be, for example, like people who are good at leading meetings is going to be joining those kind of places and going to be going to be diving into those kind of male dominant society simply because we have this celebration system that is going to be widely spreading to all those kind of enough to reach out to those kind of people, right? But thirdly, media has incentivized to broadcast those kind of situations, going to spread these celebrations, right? For example, even if you consider existence of conservative media, but still we have liberalized media that is going to be incentivized to broadcast those kind of things, right? But fourthly, the companies are also incentivized to broadcast and advertise those kind of situations, since they have, for example, capping capitalism, those kind of things, right? Since companies profit seeker, they are much more incentivized to enclose further swing borders or neutral layer in order to make them as potential customer. We think in order to reach those kind of in order to reach those kind of groups, companies are much more incentivized to, for example, invest in advertise and going to make them internalize that value and going to make those kind of people stand with that company. Yes, from if all has no, then CO.
Yeah, so only a limited number of individuals are going to get this amount of promotion on your side of the house. At your best case scenario, it seems like these people get a raise, but I don't understand why these people have the incentive to care for the feminist movement as a whole, to advocate for better pay for everyone. These people just get better pay and get raised on their individual capacity.
Firstly, we don't think that is a comparative response. At least since we are going to have bigger circle of celebration that is going to be reaching bigger number of people. At least we are going to have bigger possibility that those kind of unable persons, people who already have an accessibility or people potentially have an accessibility are going to dive into those kind of situations. But secondly, I'm going to tell you why that is not true to begin with. Firstly, we think the case coming from closing opposition, the best case coming from open opposition is so marginal for the reason A, even if you can see that even if you assume some sort of difficulty or some sort of cost is going to be rain on the side house, but rather we say individuals are rather happy to pay that cost in because they are going to be aiming further, right? We think that in order to get into, for example, even better places, those kind of individuals rather happy to cost that kind of psychological stability of those kind of places. We think those kind of things, and but secondly, we tell you still we still think that still a vast certain number of women are just having social and economic capital to be surviving in the industry. For example, people who raised in good educational places, right? That is probably having enough knowledge and expertise in order to pass down those kind of job hunting application, those kind of places. For the reason we think this is going to be maximized an impact for entire feminism and entire women. Very proud to propose.
Okay, thanks for remark. Next, I'd like to invite the government to whip sum up your case within 7 minutes. ぜひどうぞ。
はい、聞こえますか？
ちょっとちっちゃいかも。
こんな感じ？
いけます、大丈夫です。
了解です。ポイがある人は、なんだ、どうしよう。カメラが一番気づきやすいと思います。で、チャットでも気づこうとする、頑張ろうとは思いますけども、カメラとかが一番確実だと思います。ということで、よろしくお願いします。Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk about 4 things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the unique contribution of my partner in terms of defining and clarifying what we mean by celebrating the rise of corporate feminism. Secondly, I'm going to talk about, give a couple of rebuttals to what we heard from the previous speaker, the clothing opposition extension. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about harms to women in terms of how they are enforced into things, and that is not happening, specifically because of the characterization of the celebration word part of this model that my partner has mentioned. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the mechanism in which we can promote more rights to women, and that is going to be better even for the people who are living on the intersectionalities of different identities. Firstly, about the celebration. So basically, what lacked in this debate, apart from what my partner has mentioned, was an analysis of an important word in this debate, which was celebration. So celebration is not necessarily just saying, oh, we want to see a corporate feminism happening. That's what I think the other 3 teams have mentioned. But celebrating, we need to look at the unique implication of this. And this is where my partner has came into this debate. My partner specifically told you, look into your notes, that this is about celebrating and supporting, cheering up, backing up women who actively choose to jump into the hardship of male domination, and so in order to break it down. So we are talking about examples, for example, like Captain Marvel or like Wonder Woman, who still have feminine features, but they are acting in a male way overall in order to break down the male patriarchy. And all these films and narratives that support these people from jumping into this hardship is what we support. The ultimate goal of what we support is breaking down that narrative. It's not necessarily enforcement. It's not necessarily about celebrating the domination of male, like prioritize the kind of narratives and that kind of things. Why is this important? It basically takes out all the arguments from the opposition bench, as I'm going to tell you from now on in my speech. Firstly, let's look at the closing opposition's extension. I think they mentioned about how this movement causes side effect for women. Firstly, because of enforcement to all women, which we think is not true. I'll explain later. But secondly, it's about the celebration of machoism that is dominated within the corporate culture. We do not think this is true. We think this debate is about telling women that we are on your side. We support you for taking this hardship instead of us to jump into the corporate structure and changing, converting males' understanding and promoting women's rights. We are there to support you, and that is what we are talking about. So at the point you recognize that this debate is about this narrative specifically, all the arguments coming from them move down. But secondly, I think what they have mentioned was about how these movements are likely to fail. Or have no good effect. We tell you that basically you can't refer to other movements that failed in the past and say this movement is also going to fail. Because what our movement does specifically is that it specifically breaks down the patriarchy. And here is why. We tell you that this narrative is, this movement is a movement that breaks down the male's understanding that women can't do important jobs in the corporate structure. So basically, in order, when you have women actually getting the jobs in the higher places in the corporate structure, it means that these male colleagues who are also executives will work with the women. And at the point they work with women, they would male are likely to understand gradually over time that women do have excellence in terms of mindsets, in terms of ability, skills, the way they talk, and all that kind of things. And they would gradually start to understand that women can actually have important roles in society. And that means that we think that it is more likely that men are being converted to support female rights, even within these conservative companies, and that is a benefit for women, because it is likely that these executive male are also going to support things like raises for women, or having stricter policies on anti-harassment policies within the companies, and that is a benefit for all women, and that is a unique mechanism why we think this policy actually works. We think there is enough rebuttal to the previous speaker. Thirdly, let's look at the point about enforcement. The opening opposition mentioned something like, oh, the process of conversion is going to be very unhappy for women because you are acting against your will or personality. We think this is not true for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we think that you are talking about women who want to be promoted. We think that promotion is not enforcement. We think that people can opt out if they don't want to. We are talking about people who want to be promoted. It means that these people make a rational calculus within the mindset of the hardship that that person is probably going to experience versus the benefits of changing men and corporate structure. We think that we're talking about people who can make active choices. But lastly, what we have told you is this is not about enforcement. We think that these people are actually choosing to opt into it, and that's uniquely what we are talking about. We are not specifically talking about enforcement or supporting machoism. But lastly, why we think that this celebration, the society backing up these people is uniquely important in this debate. It's because, like the closing opposition mentioned in the POI, that confronting angry, powerful old men is scary and it is irritating, it is demotivating for some people. That's why we need to support them, tell them and motivate them to keep on fighting against this. And that's the only way we have women to come on top of the corporation and set standards which are good for women altogether. We tell you this is better than the opening government's rebuttal to the opening opposition or the closing opposition, which was that, oh, some level of enforcement is necessary, because we have analyzed that this is not enforcement in the first place, and therefore we can actually support the ones who are really wanting to change the corporate structure. Whilst we tell you that this is actually beneficial for the people in the intersectionalities. So when a Polish corporation decides to raise the wage of women in general or take on stricter anti-harassment policies, we think that benefits all the Islamic women and Black women within their corporation. So that is a comparative benefit over the opening opposition's case. Lastly, let's look at how we support and protect people who are harassed and that kind of things. We think opening up government, the extent of the arguments that I have mentioned was that, oh, when we have women at the top, they can change things in the company. We need to incentivize them. And that is the extent of the argument. Look down in your notes, please. We tell you what we have added from the closing opposition was the process in which this actually happens. We told you, first of all, about how the media is going to broadcast companies, and then at the point of that happens, companies seek a promotion and branding opportunity in being friendly towards these women. And they say that we are going to support these women who are going to fight against women. But secondly, what I have told you as a rebuttal to the previous speaker, in the way in which this actually is likely to convert the mindset of women, it breaks down the myth that women cannot take on important roles within the corporate structure. We tell you this is a process that still remains in this debate, and that's why we take this debate. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your remark. Next, I'd like to invite Opposition Whip to sum up your case within 7 minutes. シェアどうぞ。
あ、聞こえますか？
はい、聞こえます。
ございます。Hello, this is Opposition Whip. If you have any POIs, please put them in the chat box. I probably can't see you in the camera because my settings are in that way. So if you can put it in the chat, that would be great. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe in closing opposition, that women are entitled to make whatever choice that they want to do. And we think a narrative that forces them to act upon a specific way, especially a way that is quite scary, to be assertive towards your superiors, is something that is illegitimate because it, in ways, harms the most vulnerable people within this movement. This debate ought to be adjudicated whether or not you believe the policy changes that are going to come as a result of people acting in this manner that you get from gov benches, whereas we point out the exclusive harms to vulnerability, especially when you make this a narrative, especially when you make this some of a normalized action to take within the context of you in the workplace. I first want to point out this clarification, right? I think that both government teams are quite, like, I guess, soft in the way that they characterize celebration, because they say that we just like to support these people that exist within these places. I honestly do not understand why the delta of this manifests in this debate if they put this, because none of those both benches claim why it was necessary for you to have this narrative to begin with. That is for the reason that if you celebrate something, these women are still likely to act in that way to combat these systems. This is precisely for the reason that these people are likely to be passionate enough because they want to become and aspire to be these CEOs to still confront these political structures regardless of how the feminist movement acts. The question of the feminist movement is whether it celebrates it, puts it as an ideal for women to pursue, and that is where we told you from our speeches, the exclusive harm that comes about, which is because you coerce women to act in a specific way. There's especially condescending, especially in a manner that obviously these people do not have access to, especially when they're not able to succeed. And when that narrative takes place in that manner, I think it's incredibly harmful. I first want to start by refutations to closing government, opening government, then why we overweigh our opening. Firstly, I want to talk about closing government, right? So I want to first point out two problems with their case. The first of which is that I'm not sure why celebration is still something that's unique. Even get the clarifications that you get from the previous speaker about like celebration being something, because you still are dumping your hardships. It is oftentimes about the result, right? It's still the same thing. This is obviously consequentialist. If you celebrate something, it means it normalizes that thing. If that leads to harms for people, which we claim, then this is something that we ought not to celebrate in our status quo. The second thing is obviously the thing that I've also stated before, which is that we don't understand the necessity of this policy. If these women are likely to be passionate and they want to go confront this, why would you need the additional support of the feminist movement? We don't understand why it was critical for the feminist movement to support these women, especially when they're likely to try and pursue their careers anyway, and when those old benefits are likely to come about as a result. Therefore, we overcorrected for the benefits that we received. We're able to do this without doing anything at all because these women are likely to operate in that particular manner. I want to have further responses to their side as well, though. Firstly is the claim that they talk about how, like, there's a patriarchal society, right? So obviously, the main question I have to this claim is why did you have to be assertive to do this, right? There was zero mechanism to say why you combat that system anyways. Rather, we would say that the narrative that says that if you work in a place, whether you be a man or whether you be a woman, in the same place, for same period of time, that you ought to get serious pay, right? The question, the actual harm that comes from their policy is because of the fact that you put a prerequisite that you have to be assertive for you to claim those benefits, because it becomes normalized that when people see assertive women and non-assertive women, to be assertive women are doing something that's about, please put in POI, in the chat, now this becomes a prerequisite for you to be harmed, and this is counterproductive because it says that you have to be assertive for you to get those benefits. Whereas when we're able to advance the claim from our side of the house by saying that because you work for the same amount of hours, that you ought to be compensated in the same way, regardless of the fact that you act assertively or whether you act submissively within that sense. This is up to the individual. Therefore, it was counterproductive actually in achieving the ends because it justified the rhetoric that you ought to be benefited in that way. The second claim is that they say, like I think this comes from MO, the latter half, to say that the competition. You can access a variety of ways to help these feminist movement. It's like celebration by increasing representation. You're able to broadcast, for example. Firstly, this is generic analysis that can be applicable to every single feminist icon, whether it just be regular icons. You can have regular icons on our side of the house who might be housewives, who might be working in the corporations, advocate for similar things. What we say is that there should be plurality of these things that exist, and therefore we don't have to advance the specific narrative in specific, and we still have access to those resources because they never point out why it's exclusive. But secondarily, we would say it's counterproductive because the women who are likely to succeed in these places are likely to be those who become become CEOs who have like absolutely no incentive to help women as well, because they have the survivorship bias, because they believe that their capacity to succeed was based on their own ability and not because of the fact that they were women. And therefore they're likely to say that, oh, you should work harder as a woman because I was able to succeed, why can't you? And therefore it further perpetuates the narrative that is likely to be harmful. Next, I want to engage with opening government. There are two problems with this. The first claim is that the goal of opening government is incredibly assertive, because they say that social advancement is necessary. Like why? Like why should this be prioritized over a safe, comfortable living condition that every individual has, that women just want to have a job and want to be successful as well, right? Notice that there's zero analysis on why this should be the priority. But notice the burden on the opening government was to claim that this should be the overwhelming priority. We say that this should be one of the priorities, not the absolute priority that you ought to be imposing upon every individual. Notice that the burden of their side was to prove that this was a condition that they ought to get, and therefore this doesn't justify it. We should obviously not living in a system where this should be prioritized. But secondarily is the fact that this is overcorrective in nature, because they never talk about why the celebration of this was incredibly necessary to begin with. Because DPM says that, oh, celebration is like somewhat good, like but like this imposing upon a assertive nature was something that was incredibly harmful, rather counterproductive. They never talk about why women being assertive in the workplace leads to the benefits that they get. We can just have several women that work in those places. We should never have the feminist movement celebrate that in order to achieve those benefits. But secondarily is the fact that, this brings out significant harms that we pointed out already in our speeches. But before I move on, I'll take a POI from OG, because diagonal.
So as far as I know, the definition of this House celebrates motion is the value judgment about already existing corporate feminism. So what kind of imaginary false policy delta are you talking about exactly?
Yeah.
No, like celebration means that you obviously support this kind of thing, and we think that supporting this means it leads to people being normalized and believing that this is something that is good because the feminist movement advocates it as being good, and therefore coerces individuals to act in a specific way that is harmful. That is what we demonstrate to you as something that is harmful. Secondarily, why is it likely to be very harmful, right? One is because of the fact that these traits are unlikely to be accessed, and this is what we point out uniquely in our extension, that this is limited and inaccessible to a variety of people. There's external pressure that you have to say, that you have to get. There's survivorship bias, right? Rather than the counterfactual, you're free from these external blamings, and you have to take a neutral stance, and therefore this is likely to be beneficial to those individuals. Rather, the harms that come from this motion are unique. One is that you self-blame yourself because you believe that you're not the ideal woman because you're not able to succeed. Secondarily is the fact that corporations are able to now justify that you are not working as hard because there are other assertive women in the workplace. Why can't you work as hard? This causes additional harm for these individuals. Lastly is the fact that they're unlikely to succeed at all, right? Because the fact that you haven't changed these structural problems within those places, but you've like kind of assumed that these women are likely to succeed anyways. Therefore, these people get significant imposter syndrome, feel like they're not able to be they're not capable, and therefore worsens it, right? But secondarily is also the sexual harassment case. This is horrible because the fact that it says that being assertive and being masculine is somewhat of a good thing, and therefore reduces your chance of reducing those things together. Because the corporations is able to say women are also assertive, and therefore we should be critiquing this behavior when it is the very cause of the sexual harassment that happens. So therefore it's actively counterproductive to lessening the cases of sexual harassment. Rather, we would advocate for a world in which we say, hey, in a world where you have equal pay and equal positions, you should be not getting all of this. Why we are opening opposition is simple. Firstly, it's because we were able to demonstrate and mechanize to the extent of harms to a further extent, because with the mechanization that we give you in terms of how this is counterproductive. But secondarily, we also give you critical responses to the government that is able to delineate, that is able to neatly take down their case, and therefore we think that we're able to provide a significant amount of contribution in this space. For those reasons, oppose.
Okay, thanks very much. お疲れ様です。じゃあ、流れに沿っていき